Okay. Right. Well, thank you guys for, well, this is the end of our day. It may not be the end of your day. So it's 5 o'clock here and almost 5 o'clock here. But thank you guys for attending this afternoon. And we're excited to share with you what Davidson-Davie Community College has done in terms of engaging faculty in guided pathways. So just very quickly before we introduce ourselves, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. It might be the end before we have an opportunity to respond. We'll also try to save a little bit of time at the end to let you ask us any questions that arise. So you're welcome to hold them to the end. We're also willing and open to share anything you see today or anything you would like to learn more about. You are welcome to reach out to both of us by email. So. I am Susan Burleson, and I am the Vice President of the Davie Campuses and Institutional Effectiveness. I'm also soon to be moving into an Executive Vice President role over Student Affairs and Academic Affairs. I have been at the college for close to 20 years and had lots of different roles, but my first role there, and one near and dear to my heart, was faculty. I was faculty faculty in psychology, and then moved into various leadership roles, and now almost 20 years later, with the titles that I just shared with you. One of the jobs I had kind of in the middle was to oversee our student success initiatives. So we'll talk a little bit about our work with Achieving the Dream and Completion by Design, and those were things that I facilitated on our campus.
Hi everyone, I'm John Hardy. I am a math faculty at Davidson-Davie. I'm also the Guided Pathways facilitator for the North Carolina Guided Pathways project. I also work with the North Carolina Community College system as a Guided Pathways coach and also a coach trainer. I'm also the leader of or coordinator of their ITA project, where we are assessing Guided Pathways institutes within our system, and also working as an equity coach for the system as well. There we go. I'm posting a link. Sorry, I muted myself there for a second. A link to some of the questions that maybe you might ask throughout the presentation. So I just want to give you some of our responses to that. I'll also post that at the end as well, but just so you have some of the things we'll talk about during our presentation.
Okay, so we all kind of conceptualize guided pathways differently, and when we started talking about guided pathways, we were part of Completion by Design, and so we enjoyed and liked the loss momentum framework, which you will see running through the middle of this graphic here. We call this graphic our student success placemat. So, faculty engagement in guided pathways is really just one piece of guided pathways. It's, sort of a holistic approach taken by an institution to think about, all the touch points and all the places where, you might provide momentum for students and the places where students might run up against obstacles or barriers. So, we began sort of our real student success work. That wasn't just little pilots here and there working on pieces of student success when we became a Completion by Design college in 2011. So we created our first student success placemat, which we have continued to use as an organizing framework of the work that we do on our campus. So this is one from 2018, 2019, which is when we were really kicking off a lot of our teaching and learning work. So that's the one that I chose to share with you. But you can see here, this is something we share with the entire campus. We actually laminate it and give it out. And sometimes people really do eat their lunches on it, but it's frequently posted in offices. And so, it kind of provides an annual kind of mini strategic plan of what kinds of things are going to be happening related to student success. What are the actionable items that will be happening throughout that year? It gives us all kind of a common language, but it also increases awareness. So you can't know what's happening all over your campuses, but when you have something like this, you can refer to it and say, oh, okay, in the area of connection, we are using an enrollment van, and we're going out and sharing information with people instead of making them come to us. And so when we talk about an enrollment van in a meeting, people kind of know what we're talking about. along the bottom are our key performance indicators. We want to measure each year. How are we doing? Are the things that we say we're going to do up here actually going to have an impact on student success? And then you'll see some little color-coded and a key over on the left. That is, we've done different types of color coding, but in 1819, we had just completed some work with the Aspen Institute. And if you're familiar with their broader definition of student success, it's not just about completion, but it's about learning, equity, and labor market as well. So what are the outcomes in those areas? So we kind of mapped what initiatives were going to be contributing to movements in those 4 outcomes. Okay, so this is our placemat. I think John's going to put in the chat, if he hasn't already, a link to a blank placemat. We like to steal from others, and so we don't mind being stole from as well. So you are welcome to use this if you like it and you think it would be beneficial to your campus. We also use the back of this placemat to talk about things that are top of mind for the institution in the upcoming year. So in 1819, these were the types of things that you would see on the back of our placemat. RISE, which we're not going to talk about today, that's the North Carolina Community College system approach to developmental education now. Also, through the system office, we have the opportunity to be in North Carolina Guided Pathways to Success, which is based on AACC Guided Pathways. And so we are one of the community colleges that was involved in the first cohort. Since then, John has become a coach for other colleges, and you'll, I'm sure, recognize the essential practices which align to the AACC pillars. You can see here that we defined for our campus what we meant by those outcomes that were on the front, the color-coded pieces. And then we had just really established the guiding teaching principles. So, that was going to be a hot topic on our campus for that year. We still talk about it now, but we wanted people to really be able to, put their hands on and know what we were talking about when we mentioned the guiding teaching principles. And we're going to share with you today how we came up with those guiding teaching principles. So just a little background on our student success work. We had an innovative president, and she retired a couple years ago, and she was very involved at the national level. And so she, in 2009, began to talk on our campus about getting involved with Achieving the Dream. And in 2010, we did become involved with Achieving the Dream. And if any of you are involved with Achieving the Dream, you probably remember how you kind of try to introduce that to your campus. So, we began to talk about equity, and nobody really knew what equity was back then. We were more likely to think about equality. They were uncomfortable conversations. We pulled data we had never looked at before, and we shared it broadly. And, that was scary for people. And we got a lot of questions, and there was some paranoia. But, over time, people recognized that data we were using it for good. We were using it to improve. We weren't using it to penalize. And it was important for us to know what was happening. We began to disaggregate data as a result of being in Achieving the Dream. And of course, that has impacted the types of strategies and responses that we put in place on campus. We lucked up in 2010 when we were invited to be one of the North Carolina Completion by Design colleges. This led to lots of external support and external resources. It also led us to know Rob Johnstone, who invited us to participate in this today. And he's been a great partner, thought partner, and design partner as we've continued after Completion by Design to do work. With Completion by Design, we found that lost momentum framework, which you saw on the placemat, which has become our organizing framework. And, we began to move away from these pilot programs that were just focused on one little piece of the pathway. And, once a student moved out of that piece of the pathway, a lot of times you lost the benefits of that pilot program. So, thinking about the full student experience has really been campus changing for us. You'll see later that we liked that pathway model so much so that we even thought about the faculty pathway in the same types of terms. And, what are things that propel faculty development and faculty engagement, and what are the things that might inhibit or create barriers for faculty engagement. Also, as part of the North Carolina Community College system, we are a system where we have a central office that provides resources and support to the 58 community colleges, but then we also have autonomy in terms of we have our own boards. But in 2016, I think we had the opportunity to apply for an Aspen roadmap visit. And so basically people from the Aspen Institute and people like Rob who are engaged in the Aspen Institute work were able to come to our college and kind of do a good to great visit. And they were sharing lots of what they were learning through the Aspen Prize work. And so you'll see in a minute what their recommendation was to us around faculty. But as a result of that, we developed the task force, which existed on our campus of about 20, mostly faculty, who work to define what it means to have a classroom that is focused on excellence in teaching and learning. So here you can see this is just one little piece of the feedback report. We got a lot of feedback, it was in the 4 areas that I mentioned earlier. But under learning, the feedback was to appoint a faculty committee to define the qualities of effective instruction across the college and craft a strategy to address their conclusions through faculty professional development. The Aspen Roadmap visit included a very comprehensive interview process. So they talked with our board of trustees, they talked with students, they talked with faculty, they talked with leadership, they talked with business and industry, K-12, anybody can think about, they talked to. And when they provided us the feedback, they said there was one area where pretty much everybody agreed. And that was that we had not really engaged faculty sufficiently or effectively in our student success work. So, we had a pretty clear, I won't say directive, but it was somewhat a directive that this was a place we really needed to shift our focus. Completion by design was wonderful, and we did a lot of things. But, when we wrapped that project up, all the community colleges involved said, the one place where we had probably failed was in faculty engagement. So, we were at a good point to go ahead and start having these conversations. The feedback report led to the development of the Aspen Task Force. And so our president identified by looking at, disciplines and length at the college, a really good cross-sectional task force of mostly faculty. I think that probably 15 out of the 20 were faculty. There were a few folks who were in mid-level leadership and who supported adjunct faculty and distance learning. But primarily it was a faculty task force. And then we brought in Rob Johnstone to help us work through the process of figuring out what are the qualities of effective instruction.
I was actually got lucky enough to be a member of that task force. And building off the completion by design that we had worked on with the Lost Movement framework and working with Rob Johnstone, bringing him in, we had a lot of heated conversations and a lot of diving deep into what does teaching and learning mean to each of the faculty members at Davidson-Davie. And with that, I think we ended up having about 5 or 6 meetings over a 9-month span, which led to us developing those 6 guided teaching principles. So I have Susan jump into them. And these are, we worked on these back and forth between all the different faculty coming up with these, and these are free for anybody to take and look at. A lot of these were based off some work that we did with other institutions and from what we found from other institutions such as Carnegie Mellon. And after many heated debates, we came up with what does it mean to actually have, what is effective teaching at Davidson-Davie. And from there, this kind of also utilize the idea of how do we actually incorporate this into not only just being what is effective teaching at Davidson-Davie, but how do we incorporate it into every aspect of faculty and teaching and learning at Davidson-Davie. And so from there, kind of led into the idea of where do we need to take this, to how do we incorporate it into what we do in the not only in the classroom, but out of the classroom as well. And from there, we ended up going, lucky enough to be a part of the National Teaching and Learning Institute. And we'll have Susan talk a little bit about the 4 committees that actually came from that.
I'm getting a bit of an echo on John. I don't know if you're getting an echo on me. But if you're not muted, if you don't mind, please mute just in case. Am I echoing to you? Okay. So one of the things that we'll talk about when we talk about lessons learned is that, you really, and challenges, you really need time and space to work on these types of projects. And if you sort of leave it up to the initiative of people on campus to create the time and space, sometimes that won't happen. It's easy to just get bogged down in, whatever your daily responsibilities are and not get engaged in some of these types of projects. So, we had recognized that already about ourselves, that, we were going to have to carve out and make priority time and space for us to talk about student success and faculty engagement. So we applied for the National Teaching and Learning Institute, which is held in Washington State, and Achieving the Dream does some work with that institute. And so we took a team from the college, and the team was across different roles and levels. So we had our president with us. We had 2 vice presidents. We had a person who supports our adjunct faculty, and then we had faculty. And so we had these guiding teacher principles, and we had to figure out, how do we move from just saying we have these to actually demonstrating that they matter and that they happen throughout everything that we do. So we started thinking about, what's the faculty pathway look like, and what are the types of things as faculty, move across that pathway that we need to be focused on to ensure that these principles were incorporated in our work. So we thought about, what happens when you bring a faculty into the institution? What are all the things that exist around onboarding? We are in North Carolina, so we don't have tenure or unions. So we have something called rank instead. And then, we evaluate or assess faculty on performance evaluations annually. Now, every 2 years, unless you're in your first year. So, we do have some processes, and we wanted to make sure that those were aligned to the things that we were saying were important when it came to being an excellent faculty member. I'll show you too. I've got another slide that actually shows more of this, but the other 2 areas were faculty professional learning and outcomes assessment. It was important that the process be faculty-led, faculty-owned, and faculty-driven. While there were administrators present in the development of the project, primarily we were there to make sure that the faculty got the support and resources that they needed, kind of to make sure they didn't go totally off the rails in terms of budget and things like that. Which it did take a little time for us to have the budget to do a lot of the things we wanted to do, but we really wanted it to be, grassroots from faculty, because that's how we knew we would get the engagement. Here you can see some of the things that fell underneath the 4 categories that I started to talk about a while ago. And we had 4 faculty members who were at the Institute who each sort of took the lead on these 3 areas. And then we brought in more to help co-lead and faculty to serve. We actually started off one August semester saying who wants to be involved in these committees, and we ended up with like 20 faculty on every committee. So people were very excited and engaged and really wanted to be a part of these conversations. I'll say that, the onboarding and professional learning are the 2 that I think we've probably done the best when it comes to incorporating the guiding teaching principles, faculty progress, we did a pretty good job with that. Outcomes assessment has been a little bit more of a challenge, and John will talk more about that when we get into that pillar of the guided pathways model. For onboarding, you know, our process had been, you know, kind of boring and not really exciting for somebody who might be thinking about working at the college. We did not have a lot of diversity in our faculty, and so we knew that there was work that we really needed to focus on this particular part of our faculty pathway. So we rewrote the faculty position, we rewrote the faculty job description, and now instead of, you know, it's saying, here's what we expect of you, you know, we hope you have the right requirements to work at our college. You know, we highlight what makes us special. We highlight what makes us unique and why you should want to work here. We also, you know, took out extremely detailed positions. We took out requirements that might inhibit people from applying and that weren't really all that important. So, you know, we did a lot of work there. The orientation, it's evolved quite a bit as a result of the guiding teaching principles, and now it is more of a 9-month process instead of, you know, you get something in that first week and then good luck after that. So we've really tried to think about what kind of knowledge do you need at what time, and provide more just-in-time knowledge versus, you know, a complete dump of knowledge that probably most people are going to forget after they walk out of the room. And then for faculty professional development, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we talk about our Center for Teaching and Learning. But that was one of the things that was on the top of the priority list for our faculty. Here you can see how there was the application of the loss momentum framework to the faculty pathway. So this was something that was actually done by Audrey Yeager, which I don't know that you can see her name down there in the bottom, but when we were doing some completion by design retreats at the end of completion by design, we had a little money left and we really wanted to focus on faculty engagement. And so we did a few things afterwards. And so she, along with some faculty and some leadership, thought through what would the loss momentum look like for faculty. Now, faculty don't sort of stay on this path of connection, entry, progress, and completion, but, you know, faculty are at different stages and need different things throughout their careers. So you can see we have connection, establishing, navigating, and leading, and a focus on teaching and learning. Now, again, it's not meant to be a linear pathway, more like these little puzzle pieces that fit together. And we thought about, you know, from an institutional standpoint, what are the things that we can do that, you know, generate interest, that, you know, make people want to come and be part of our campus, and move them along in the direction of a positive career with us. And then what are the things that might discourage people from working or being retained at the institution?
How's my audio now? Just real quick.
It's echoing for me, but I don't know about other people.
Does anybody in the chat have any other issues with my audio? Does it sound okay? Okay. I'm gonna reset my audio real quick. Maybe it was just a weird glitchy thing going on. Anyway, so quickly, what we're gonna do is kind of transition. You do have echo. Try to reset everything again. How does that sound? So echoing. If it is, I might have Susan talk a little what's going on.
John, you might want to log off and come back on and see if it helps, because you didn't in the first session, so I don't know what happened. So let me just tell you a little bit about kind of where we are today. And again, you know, this is a journey, and so we know we still have a lot of work left to do. But there's some areas that have been a focus, and I believe there's some more slides that will talk about this. But We've definitely done procedural and policy kind of overhaul over the last couple years. We've made some structural changes. We've created the Center for Teaching and Learning. We were very fortunate to get a Title III grant. And then we've been engaged in the North Carolina Guided Pathways project. So, John, you want to try to talk, or you want me to keep going? Okay. So here you can see the.
How's this sound? Does it sound better?
Way better.
Okay. Don't know what happened. I have no idea. I haven't tried anything. So I'll jump in and talk about the center. The center was, built out of a couple different initiatives. One of the first places we kind of really started talking about it in true was during the Aspen Task Force. We put together a proposal during that task force and definitely got shut down by the president because it was way too high of a budget. And then through a couple different iterations, both with the committees and from some other committees, we finally got together a budget and the funds to actually fund the Center for Teaching and Learning. And what the center is a place where not only professional development can kind of come from, but also where ideas can be brought. So one of the biggest things that we have is if a faculty member feels there's professional development that would be beneficial to them or to their department, they can go to the center and say, hey, can we do this? And the center can say, well, let me look into it. They can see if they can find the funds, the resources, professional development that's out there and try to bring that to Davidson-Davie. They're also working with leadership on the idea of if we have an academics affair meeting where we need to have some type of professional development attached to it, let's talk with them and work with them to develop that and make sure it is beneficial to faculty. And I know we've all been in those meetings where we're like, oh, it's just another academics affair. And now it's, wait a minute, this is relevant to me, and it's becoming more and more relevant. So the idea is that anytime faculty are engaging with professional development in some way at Davidson-Davie, the center is making sure that it's relevant to the majority and not just a specific group, or if it's not going to be meaningful to us at all. And I can sit here and we could talk about this for about an hour, talk about the structure and everything. If you want more information about how we created the center or the structure itself or the budget or so forth, please just email us at the end, and I have document after document that I can come up with. There's also great resources out there as well. If you would like to look into a great Center for Teaching and Learning, Sinclair Community College out of Ohio has done an amazing job with their center, and that's one of our resources that we used when we first started this. I'm going to pass it back over to Susan and let her talk a little about Title III because she's really been leading that.
So after not getting Title III and not being funded down the slate, we revised our Title III and paid attention to what the reviewers had said on the failed Title III. And so it actually kind of ended up working out because we had time to do a lot of the work that John and I have just talked about. And so in 2019, we were granted a Title III Strengthening Institutions federal grant, and it's a little more than $2 million. It's $2.5 million maybe. And it's called Project DIAL Success, with DIAL standing for Differentiated Instruction and Intervention for Academic and Life Success. And looking at the data for our institution, we recognized that we had some achievement gaps. We recognized that there were certain courses and certain disciplines where those achievement gaps were bigger. And some of those courses were very high enrollment courses. So, and some were gateway, but were acting as gatekeeper courses. So we knew that looking at our own institutional data, there were places that we really needed to focus on, and many of those places were related to the classroom. The Title III grant actually has other pieces in it, so I won't talk as much about them today. But again, if you have interest in applying for one of these grants, we also used a consultant who I would highly recommend. But I'd be glad to share additional information if anybody's interested. So specifically related to faculty and faculty development, the grant has 5 summer institutes. And each summer institute has a different focus. So it is possible for a faculty member to be interested in and be engaged in more than one summer institute. The plan is to take 15 faculty members a year, and it's a mix, primarily full-time, but we do use adjuncts, allow adjuncts to apply and participate as well. We've been fortunate that we've had more interest than we had slots, and we've had some extra money. So we've been able to take that number up to 17 last year, and I'm pretty sure we're looking at 17 again this summer. Last year, the topic was on growth mindset and resiliency, it was kind of a good year to talk about resiliency. And then this year, we'll be talking about culturally responsive teaching practices. And again, we have a faculty of 90 to 100, depending on the time of year, but that's our full-time faculty membership. And so, we're getting about a fifth of them who want to be in the Summer Institute. So by the time we finish this grant, we hope most have had the opportunity to be involved. And then also, usually in the summer as well, because you've got to have that time and space, we do, we target certain disciplines. So in the grant, we've sort of laid out which disciplines we'll focus on each year. So last year it was some of our social sciences. Moving into this year, it's math and science. And we let faculty from the discipline apply to go through active learning course redesign. And, we bring in tons of resources, and those faculty have, kind of higher expectations in terms of taking what's learned and really implementing it pretty quickly. There are good stipends associated with this, so you're able to provide some incentives for faculty to get engaged, especially on their summer break, and then to do the work. So we're on 8-week sessions now, so Summer Institute wraps up, and the active learning course design, professional development wraps up, and then the faculty will have some of the learnings incorporated into the second 8-week course for pilot, and then they will do more the following year. In addition to that, we're also using completion coaching. So our faculty do not advise. It is primarily a teaching role. So we have advisors, but completion coaches are really next level, more intrusive, more proactive coaches. And we were able to purchase Starfish Predictive Analytics, which Starfish is what we use for our early alert and connection system as well. And this fall, we'll be kicking off the use of predictive analytics. We're going to do some professional development on using predictive analytics in an appropriate manner, and not using it to, create unrealistic expectations, or to potentially believe a student would not be successful in your course because of the data. So, we're looking at some ethical uses of predictive analytic professional development before we move into using it and sharing it with faculty and staff. But the completion coaches, they carry caseloads of about 300 students, and these are students that, we recognize just based on, the information we have about them that they may have difficulties. And so we want to intervene and provide lots of wraparound supports before they need that support, and definitely before they are, really close to the edge of dropping out.
So even though we'd been working on guided pathways with starting with completion by design and some other initiatives, we were lucky enough to be a part of cohort A of the North Carolina Community College System's Guided Pathways project. We were one of 17 schools, and I believe a little over half of the schools have been part of both cohort A and B. We wanted to have a cohort C, but that got delayed after last year. Hopefully we can bring that up soon and get that started, but want to kind of go over some of the things of how faculty were involved with the steps of what we did with the Guided Pathways project, and then where we're at currently, where we're trying to go next. So first off, with faculty, we want to make sure what we were working on already was already integrated into our work. So all these different committees and the Center for Teaching and Learning and the guide teaching principles, all these things we wanted to make sure they were incorporated in the process that we were going to start with guided pathways. A lot of times people think when they hear guided pathways, they think, oh, it's a certain number of steps or certain things that we need to do. It's not that. It's more or less bringing them to things that are happening on campus and making sure they're focused on the idea of pathways in general. And so that's where we started the process. From there, we started moving into more focusing on specific faculty and departments and asking them and surveying them and asking about what are they doing, what's working well, what is not working well within their programs, within their departments, how are they helping students along their path in their programs within their departments, and get a better understanding of how they're actually assessing that as they're moving forward. It's different for different areas and different faculty. And from there, we started working on the true idea of really creating those degree maps, those sequences and those pathways, and making sure we didn't have the gateway gatekeeper courses, making sure the critical success courses were integrated into those pathways, trying out common first semester if we could, making sure milestones were identified, and so forth. And slowly but surely, we were working on that and worked through all of our different programs and departments and started incorporating into our catalog and making sure our new website all incorporated that. And we wanted to launch it, and then COVID struck, and it kind of stopped us dead last year with where we're at. And so we did a lot of work getting everything set up, working through those different pillars, and we were getting to the fourth pillar, and we were hoping we were going to start working on it, but we had to kind of take a break. But though we had a break, we still could ask those questions. So we dived deeper. We started working on thinking about what is really student learning. Are we actually looking at that and making sure that excellence in teaching and learning is incorporated in the way that our students are actually learning from that? And so on the screen are some of the questions that we kind of thought about and worked on and asked of our faculty. And from there, we wanted to start really focusing on the fourth pillar. So that's where we're kind of going towards next. And so one of the first things we did was make sure, one, as a faculty, we were incorporating those teaching and learning principles in everything we did. So yes, it is part of the job description. Yes, it is part of our evaluation. Yes, it's part of our rank process. I have them hanging behind my desk in my office. They're hanging in the copy room. They're hanging in the break room. They're everywhere. And as a faculty group, every faculty member thought of them more as this is what we're going to be doing. This is the standard and not the actual way we're being assessed. So even though they are on our assessment or our job description, it's not there to try to say you have to do this. It's there to say this is what is expected, not only by you, by your supervisor, but by your colleagues. And so we made sure that all faculty were stepping up to the plate and making sure they were incorporating that into their idea of what they are doing as a teacher. We also made sure that we understood what faculty were really assessing. So we took that data from those surveys and found out that though we were assessing data in a manner that could be effective within those different departments, different program areas were all assessing data differently. And that was not leading to a true effective and meaningful outcome for the institution. So that really kind of started that process of us thinking about what's the best way our program should be assessing data, and what's the best way our students should be assessed, our student learning outcomes should be assessed within the classroom. And so we're starting that process of really reworking that and making sure those guided teaching principles are incorporated and making sure the idea of guided pathways is really pushing forward how we're assessing. And so we have two different committees working on those that redesign currently. The program redesign is being led by a couple different people, and our student learning outcomes is being led actually by our faculty senate president, who's actually making sure it's incorporated from all different areas. And we're getting ideas of what our different areas are doing now and what's going to be the best way we can move forward with coming up with really assessing student learning. Now, along the way, though, we have had a bunch of different challenges and a bunch of different things that we've learned from all this different work across different areas. And I'm going to let Susan talk about it because she's got more experience with all these different areas than I do.
Yeah. So John and I, this is our second time doing this. I can't remember if he said this or not, but as you work through guided pathways, and I mentioned one of the I guess shortfalls of completion by design was that we really did not get faculty engaged like we should. And now I think what I hear from those involved with the AACC pathways and the North Carolina GPS pathways work is that there's 4 pillars, and the one that's sort of the most difficult to wrap your head around and to make movement on is the one about our students learning. I can remember asking Rob many years ago, who's doing learning outcomes well? Because as Dean of Institutional Effectiveness or Vice President of Institutional Effectiveness, that's something that I've had to focus on and try to corral on our campus. And, it's hard, and there's not very many really good models out there. So it was exciting when the AACC pathways emerged from the completion by design work and had that as a pillar. I think the challenge still continues to be, how do you operationalize it, and how does it actually happen on your campus? So that's still, I think, one of the biggest challenges, and I don't know that any of us have solved that yet. Related to that is that probably your campuses are very similar to our campus. I mean, John is our go-getter faculty, and John is on practically every committee we've ever had related to student success and faculty engagement, and other committees that have nothing to do with that. He's just one of those type of faculty, and we've got that subset of faculty. But how do you get widespread participation and representation in this type of work? And that can be very, very difficult. I've already mentioned that, it's hard to just make this an add-on to what we already do. We're all busy. We're all doing, the best we can in our roles. And, we have to primarily focus on, particularly if you're a faculty member, on teaching and learning. So when do you find time to talk about, how you do it better? So, for us, it's been taking teams to conferences that are pretty well focused. We do take groups to the bigger conferences like DREAM and AACC, but anytime you can carve out, a conference where it's focused on teaching and learning, like the institute that we went to, those things work really well. We went on retreats. Sometimes we have faculty symposium days or whatever, but again, we designate data days for faculty that we tag on to our fall breaks and our spring breaks. But it's really important to say, this is the time for this, and this is when we're going to do this. And everybody knows that well in advance, that those are the conversations that are going to be had. This is, partly related to your culture. So, we had people in our administration who, believed in change, and who preached about change, and who lived, the words that they spoke. And so our president was very involved at the national level, and she served on boards. She did a lot around equity and international education, and she now works for, I think, AACC and ATD. So, she would go and she would read and she would learn about all these things that were happening and that were really impacting student success. And she would come back and tell all of her staff, and we would then, have to figure out how to take what she was learning and put it into action. So we had to shift. And it started with Achieving the Dream, and then, the other initiatives that were on the slide earlier. There was a recognition that while we were doing really good stuff, and we have good outcomes, we rank way up there in terms of the 58 North Carolina. But, if your graduation rate's in the low 30s, then your non-graduation rate is in the high 60s. So while we were proud of the fact that we stacked up nicely next to other people, we also recognized, God, there's a ton of things we still need to do to make sure that most of our students find success. This is another, I think, common issue on campuses where, you decide that there's something you want to focus on. So you start to talk about it, and you start to build awareness around it, and you can sometimes get stuck. For a long time, we did all read books around equity, and we read a book and we talked about it. And we read a book and we talked about it. It's like, when are we going to do something? So, it's difficult to go from that awareness building piece to that action piece. And, particularly when you're kind of on the forefront. And I think that's kind of where we are right now with equity, and the conversations we're having about racial justice and things like that. We're all having those conversations right now. We're all trying to figure it out, and there's nobody out there that's done it in a way that we can just sort of replicate it. We can go and say, hey, what did you do? And did it work? And can we just copy that? So that's always a tough piece. Some things that we learned along the way. So you're always going to have naysayers. You're always going to have those curmudgeons who, you know, if they get an audience, they can potentially sabotage efforts. So we found that when we had naysayers, or we had groups of people who were thinking, you know, this is just the next initiative, in a year this will be gone, you know, there's no reason to really get engaged, this isn't lasting, it's the new Kool-Aid, then, you know, there were ways that we sort of combated that. And one was to have personal conversations with individuals or small groups. And, you know, before we were going to take it to a big group and talk through it, you know, we would sometimes pull in the people that we knew were going to be the resistors, and we would have conversations about, you know, what type of data that we were seeing, or what kinds of things we were hearing about that were happening nationally that were proven or promising practices. And, you know, we would kind of hear what are the things they're going to be worried about, so then you could kind of prepare responses. We had one particular person when we were doing program redesign through Completion by Design. She was a social science faculty member, humanities faculty member, and, you know, I mean, she was a big believer in a lot of choice. And that, you know, students really, when they came in, they needed a breadth of opportunities and courses to take. And so we had tons of courses that didn't transfer anywhere as anything other than just a free elective. So, you know, we needed to scale back on some of that stuff. And, you know, eventually she came on board. She started thinking about her own children who were growing up, and the fact that she was going to be paying for credit that didn't count for them. And once we got her on board, she was able to talk to her colleagues, and our work was easy then. We also learned as a campus that, again, if administration says, we got a problem here, we need to do something about it, you might automatically get pushback because administration's saying it. But if you bring in Rob Johnstone, or you bring in, you know, somebody from Achieving the Dream, then, you know, our campus was much more willing to be open to talking about what kinds of things can we do to, you know, impact positive change. This is something that we've all learned this last year, which is, you know, that it's not always possible to get everybody in the same room at the same time. And so use technology to facilitate communication. Also use multiple ways of sharing information so that, you know, what is happening on campus is transparent. In some cases, you know, we wanted the center and the guide and teaching principles to be faculty-led, faculty-driven, but, you know, there still needed to be conversations up, down, across, because, you know, there were resources that were needed and support was needed, and you know, you needed to get a majority of people on board. So you got to build and maintain relationships across all levels. And then everything takes longer than you will ever think it will take. And again, that may be partly cultural, but, you know, for us, we are an institution that talks about things for a while. We build consensus. We bring in, you know, everybody we can possibly bring in to get feedback, and then we do something. So, you know, again, there were times where those of us who were in the conversations every single time felt like the conversation was never going to end. And, you know, we were just ready to move. But again, in order to get that broad-based support, we needed to take the time that it took to get the results that we were hoping for.
So we quickly want to talk about a couple of next steps that we are going to be working on. We've already kind of mentioned some of this, but we want to just reiterate where we're going next. One thing we didn't really talk about or mention was the idea of pathways for part-time students, and that's something that we did really look into and really explore, but we found that it was really hard to really construct that before having the actual groundwork created, meaning the idea of going through the whole program's degree maps, and all the different courses associated with that. Now that's something we also want to go back and explore. And also with COVID now in place and things that are changing and people are different predicaments, part-time students there's new part-time students that maybe weren't part-time in the past that are now because of certain circumstances they are under. So we want to continue to explore that. We also want to explore the idea of using data to increase the student engagement and success. Pretty much that sums up the idea of us really going back towards looking not only at program review and student-centered learning outcomes, but also making sure that we're assessing our data, assessing our students and student success appropriately within the classroom and outside the classroom. There's also a couple other things. I'm going to pass it back over to Susan real quick and then go from there.
So I actually, just start the first presentation, left an equity meeting. So we have about 75, 80 equity champions on our campus, and then we have an equity steering committee. And following completion by design, not only did we feel like we needed to engage faculty, but we also really needed to be talking about equity. And again, I mentioned some of our data earlier. Our data looks good in the aggregate, but when you start to disaggregate, you find out that there are certain student groups that are not doing well. And you need to dig down and figure out what's going on there. So we've been doing a lot of work on our campus around equity over the last 3 or 4 years. And the presentations that were being done today, which is our last equity meeting of the semester, people on the equity champions, which are more staff than faculty right now, the teams were working on identifying resource guides for all the academic programs on our campus, and the things that they were sharing were unbelievable. So this is something that we'll be sharing with our faculty, and they will have a place to go and look. If I teach cosmetology, I can go and find these videos and these articles and these resources that might help me better understand the students that are coming into my program. So really exciting. And again, we're sort of taking a pathways model. We're thinking about what does that look like when it comes to marketing, and connecting with our students and bringing our students in and going through advising all the way to the time that they complete, and then post-completion outcomes related to labor market. As a result of COVID and the fact that we had to pivot so quickly, we this summer did sort of a strategic planning process called Reimagining DDCC. And there we really talked about, what have we learned in the first about 3 months of COVID? What do we want to do moving forward? What types of resources do we need? And now we're doing a 4-year strategic plan. So we actually should have done our strategic plan last spring, and I'm really glad now that we didn't get started as quick as we should have on it, because we would be totally redoing it now, because no one could have predicted, what our future held last year in January. So throughout the strategic planning process, though, faculty and excellence in teaching and learning continues to be a theme. John and I are both on the strategic planning committee, and probably our first theme is going to be that we champion learning. And I think that's a key is, if you say and I'm pretty sure any strategic plan would have this, but in anything that we've done at the college, if it's something we feel like we should all be focused on, it is in our strategic plan, because we like to use that sort of as our roadmap, our guide. John, I think this was you, but I'm happy to talk through this one.
Okay. Yep. Sorry, I was getting that link ready there at the end. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep. So just overall, our long-term goals, just kind of reiterate the ideas that we're trying to make sure we are incorporating and making sure everything is following the same, fitting together appropriately. The first one is the idea of meaningful faculty engagement. I think that's been the biggest word that's come into the vocabulary of multiple different people, multiple different initiatives over the last couple of years. It's going from effective and success, and really meaningful is a new one that's really popping up a punch. And we want to make sure that when faculty are engaged on a committee, if they're involved in the classroom with the student, if they're involved with students outside the classroom, that they are doing it in a meaningful way and not just on there to be on there, or being in the classroom to be in the classroom. We're also really fostering the idea of being really collaborative across all different areas. One of the biggest things that popped up, we were talking about strategic planning, was the idea of communication across different areas. And that's going to be one of the key things that we're going to be focusing in on, making sure that the advisors are communicating with faculty, that are communicating with completion coaches, and they're communicating with tutors and the librarians and everybody else that we can bring in. We're also really making sure that we have a process and a position for making sure faculty that we are retaining them. There was a kind of a restructuring that I think Susan may have talked about it earlier. That was when I was getting cut out earlier, of the restructuring of our academics, and making sure there are opportunities for faculty to move up and to make sure they are progressing along their careers. And then in the forefront of almost anybody's idea is we're really enhancing the student engagement, making sure we're focusing on retention and completion, every aspect of the student's progress along their pathway. What I'm going to post in the chat is the document I posted earlier. These are some of the questions that maybe popped up during that presentation or before, or here at the end, that we kind of pre-populated some answers for. And so I want to make sure you have that. But what we'll do now is kind of open up for the rest of the time for any questions from anybody on anything, if it's specifics or it's more general, whatever you would like.
Hi, I'm Carlos Lopez from Moreno Valley College. Thank you guys for doing this today. And I just want to say I really appreciated your Placemat. We've been looking for a tool to try to organize the work that we've been engaged in, and I think it's also going to be a really nice way to capture all the progress that we've made. That's one of the challenges we've really faced at our college, that trying to get everybody to see everything that we've actually done and all the progress that we've made to stand up engagement centers and reformatting our school structure and creating cohort caseload-based models. And it's just, there were a lot of moving pieces and a lot of people had little parts of it. And I think that was a really nice tool to bring it together. I just want to say thank you. I wrote it down, and I'll be downloading the slide deck to make sure that we build one.
It was really transformational at our college. It just provided a way to organize things. I didn't go over this, I don't think, in this session, but we had joined ATD, we were CBD, completion by design, and then we were working on our QEP for our accreditation, which is quality enhancement plan. And, people were just confused by all those acronyms, and it was like alphabet soup. So, that's kind of how we got to it. We're like, we need a placemat to catch all this soup. And so our first one actually color coded the 3 initiatives, but it was all under the umbrella of success. So while for accreditation, you kind of needed to know what the QEP was, you didn't really need to know what was ATD and what was CBD. We're all focused on student success. So if you want to see the evolution of our placemats, I could provide them back to 2011. The first year we did it, we actually put a timeline on the back because we had to create a timeline for one of our projects. So we shared that with campus, and it just sort of took off from there. The newer ones are better than the first one, but I'm happy to share if you'd like to see those.
I'd appreciate it. I'm planning on getting a little in and out paper cap and just dish these out to everybody as lap mats for everyone to have.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I think we're coming up on the end of our time based on the warning I got just a few minutes ago. But if you have any questions after this, or you're doing work and you think of us, feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're always willing to help.